and welcome to Analog Slop, where two music industry lifers revisit their youth via the NME and Melody Maker of the 90s. We will be exploring artists we discovered as wide-eyed teenagers and who disown as sneering 20-somethings. Now, unshackled from hipster baggage, we dive deep into the pre-digital age to look back on a time when the music industry was doomed again. My name is Graham Best. I've worked in music publishing and music tech for 20 years.
And my name is Adam Bushell. I've been a music supervisor for 20 years. Each week, one of us will read the NME, one of us will read the Melody Maker, and we'll pick out the most interesting stories and discuss them. This week is the 13th of June, 1998. The Melody Maker goes pop, the Spice Girls, Space, Ocean Colour Scene and Ian McCulloch ask the question, how does it feel to be on top of the world? And the NME asks the question, is music dead?
You join us in June 1998, and this week I have the pleasure of the NME being back in my orbit after some time spent in the Melody Maker trenches. The cover of the NME this week is a simple one. It is a single image of a Union Jack guitar on fire, with the title, The Burning Issue, Why British Music is Going Up in Smoke. Amusingly, there is no other editorializing on that front cover. There is simply a list of bands along the bottom of the page. So it appears to the casual eye that the reason why British music is going up in smoke is a combination of Garbage, Symposium, Shed 7, Ash, Dr. John, Elliott Smith, and Kaniki.
Yeah, I'm most surprised by Dr. John in that list.
British music is going up in smoke because Dr. John is flooding the scene with heroin.
Exactly.
Interestingly, there's no article trailers. It's literally just that list of band names, which I can't help but think was a deliberate choice.
That is weird. That is weird. That's a choice.
Yeah, I mean, for a bit of context, like I said, it's 1998. And the NME has made the editorial decision that the party is very much over. No one likes music anymore. All festivals are cancelled and we should give up.
I'm ready. Are you, Graham? After 6 weeks of this.
For the vortex of time, the NME is sending us a message.
So this week I had the Melody Maker. It's the 13th of June, 1998. Tommy Scott from the band Space is on the lead cover, holding a replica of the World Cup aloft, because it being summer 98, it means the World Cup is on in France. If you're looking for insight into the 98 World Cup, boy, are you listening to the wrong podcast. Just in extension of your party's over theme. I don't know how many pages the NME is this week, but the Melody Maker is a scant 48 pages.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, the NME has girth.
Exactly. It always had girth. I remember it, even in the kind of aughts so many fucking bands in the aughts, they needed like 3 times the space to fit them all in. But
yeah, I don't mean to brag, but I'm on 64 pages.
Okay, well, okay, that's a full 16 more than me that you had to read. So I don't know, I feel pretty good. But yeah, it literally took me about 5 minutes to read the Melody Maker this week. I'll get into why later. They also mirroring the party's over vibe, but in a slightly different way. Yeah, the Rock and Roll Guide to World Cup 98 is what it says on the front. And yeah, it's literally almost front to back coverage of the World Cup.
It's funny, the World Cup thing, like, it took me about halfway through the issue before I realised there was this, like, constant series of references to the World Cup. I checked the Melody Maker.
This is weird.
Oh, wait a minute. It's like, why is there so much football commentary in this magazine?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, the NME's on this party's over mood, and thinks we should give up. But by June 1998, I feel that, and I think this applies to both of us, I feel like we kind of had started to. in terms of the enemy's relevance to our like musical tastes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Like, if we hadn't checked out completely, like I know when we did the 1997 episode, we got very starry-eyed about kind of how much of an impact that year's music had made on us.
Yeah.
And by 1998, certainly by June 1998, the doors of musical perception have been kicked in by the previous year. In general, whatever the NME was selling felt kind of monochrome and two-dimensional. Whereas, like, after the previous year, there was like a lot of, I don't mean this disparagingly, there was a lot of kind of entry-level dance stuff.
Yeah.
So like Daft Punk's Homework, their debut album. I think Chemical Brothers had been on my radar for a couple of years by that point. But the idea of a Live at the Social mix CD.
The Freestylers, obviously.
I have omitted their coverage from the NME from my notes this week. I just couldn't do it.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah, sorry, go on.
Do you know there's I did not realize this, but apparently their breakthrough hit has someone doing a ragga vocal of the hook from Wonderwall, which I was not aware of.
Oh my god.
But anyway, so yeah, things like Daft Punk Homework, Chemical Brothers Live at the Social mix CD. I think I was definitely hotter on this than you were, but like the very early Basement Jaxx stuff.
Do you know what? I never liked Basement Jaxx that much. I loved the second album, I think, more than the first one. And
really?
the first one, yeah, exactly. Listening now, I probably wouldn't be into it, but like, I remember buying the first one, buying the early singles, and being like, "This does nothing for me," and I wish it would, because I'm supposed to like this, and it's not happening.
Yeah, I remember loving Red Alert because there was like unostensible link to the sort of P-Funk sound in there.
Yeah,
but the rest of the album, I was a bit like, this is fine, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm going to try my hardest to enjoy this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, another one of those bands whose reputation would have been made on the early singles that we just didn't hear.
Yeah, their reputation was made before they signed to a label. Like, yeah, that was like it was like a very, very Southeast London thing as well. Like, I remember by September '98, when I'd moved to London and was in Southeast London, there were definitely people in my like freshers halls who were like, "Shall we try and find Basement Jaxx like raves around here?"
Yeah, I went to one with you. Not a rave, but we saw them live in a pub in South London. Do you remember?
Vaguely.
There's an unrepeatable anecdote from that night.
Yeah, I know what night that is. Yeah.
Anyway,
my point being, like, early dance stuff is in the mix. Like, hip hop is something like certainly I was listening to more and more. I think you already listened to it a lot, but for me, it was kind of coming more and more at the forefront. I think we'd started to pick up on Mojo. So there was a lot of 60s and 70s rock, like 60s and 70s soul and funk. I think the Beach Boys were becoming more and more of a thing for us, which we'll come back to later. Marvin Gaye was a big one as well. And I know for me, this is around about the time that I spend £5 on an incredibly low production value CD compilation of Funkadelic, which changes my life.
Ultimate Funkadelic.
Ultimate Funkadelic, the best $4.99 I have ever spent.
No longer would you say a funk band couldn't play rock.
A simple question that opened so many doors.
Enemy should have put that on the cover.
But that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Like, we, as in like individually, but also like our circle, are kind of drawing on more and more musical influences. And also, it was the point where we were starting to finish sixth form, and you're starting to think about university and where you may end up as part of university. So for me, that was really, really London focused. Like, London felt within reach.
Yeah.
And like the possibilities of London just made like the enemy complaining that indie rock wasn't what it used to be. It's just like, who gives a fuck?
I could told you that. Fucking shit. Sorry, it's too much. But listen, we've done 95, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, not in a kind of, it really is not hand on heart, not revisionist history at all to say that was the year I think both of us were most focused on that music. Not to pretend that we weren't focused on it either side of that, but that is the year where so much of it is popping off. The culture is that. It's like a hard thing to explain to people that weren't there, but it's like
it's a really big part of the cover story. Like when you kind of start to unpick the cover story in the anime this week.
it's like if you were a teenager a few years ago and you loved mainstream films, big blockbusters more than anything in the whole world, and you were like, I don't like Marvel movies, you'd be like, that's weird. Like, do you know what I mean? It would be like saying that if you were like, I love music, but I don't like, I have no skin in the game when it comes to Blur v Oasis or whatever nonsense was going on. It would be an odd take and very, you'd be ahead of your time if you were 16 at that point and not kind of at least partly consumed by what was going on because it was everywhere.
I think that is very hard to articulate to anyone who kind of became a teenager after like the 2010s, because that centralized culture or the fact that it is a lot harder to find your specific niche or lane.
I call it the monoculture. It might take off. I don't know.
Maybe it will.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, but that's exactly the right kind of title for it. The monoculture is very much a thing in that pre-internet age.
Whether you're listening to the most underground shit ever or something that came out 30 years ago, it's always a reaction to what's going on like right then and there in front of your face. And yeah, like you're engaging with it on some level. None of us were that diehard fans of any of these bands, but we all had opinions on them and liked albums over others and tracks over others and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think any of us had on an Oasis t-shirt, but like we had a favorite B-side.
I think I did own an Oasis t-shirt actually.
Really?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't know if I bought it or I got it. I owned all of their records that up to that point. I was really fucking into Oasis.
You had those singles box sets that came in reproduction Benson and Hedges packs.
Yeah. I had all that. I had the VHS live stuff. We've talked about that before, but like some of it. But I wasn't like, this is my favorite band or anything. Like I just thought they were good and they were popular and they were around at the time and what was going on at the time.
Yeah, but that's the nature of Oasis, isn't it? I think for like, I don't know how to talk about this without getting in cliche, but I think certainly for us at the time, it was like, this is a band with some good songs I enjoy. It was not this is the band that can help me navigate the path to adulthood.
And that's the difference I think between them and the Stone Roses. They had that vibe about them that they were changing lives and that people were quitting their jobs as civil servants to go and do, I don't know what the fuck, sell bucket hats, whoever, but like...
and at the age of 46, I would consider that to be a poor decision.
But I don't know, but they have that kind of, there's that revolutionary us against them zeal, whereas like Oasis, it's more this monolithic thing that's going on that you engaged with when it was happening and were like, I really like the song Slide Away or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm falling into like the kind of like the romanticized view of Oasis here. But for something like the Stone Roses, the magic is in the group itself. Like, it's a vibe, it's like a charisma, it's a visual thing, it's all those things. With Oasis, the magic is in the community reaction to it.
The Seahorses, the magic is harder to locate, but it's there. Just like it's there in Noel Gallagher's High Flying Bird.
The magic is at the end of the last John Squire guitar solo.
10 minutes well spent.
So we should probably get on to what's actually in his magazine.
This is actually good. This is good context, really, because actually what we've done is explain that not only us, but the whole country was slightly obsessed with contemporary British indie rock music, right? But at this point in time, the writing is on the wall. Noel Gallagher's guitar is in flames on the cover of the NME. What's the Blur track from the 5th album, Death of a Party?
Yes, yeah.
It's like it's the cover is what that song sounds like. Do you know what I mean? It's like everyone's got into heroin or cocaine and done way too much of both, and the music's not quite doing what it was, and people are ready to move on, basically, leaving the Enemy and the Melody Maker in a bit of a quandary.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like going on the Enemy cover story, I suspect this had a bigger impact on my thinking than I realized at the time, because there's a lot of like quite detailed music business analysis and deconstruction in this cover story.
Okay.
Like arguably of a higher level than I would expect from the Enemy in 1998.
Oh, interesting.
And the weirdest bit is there's no one name on the byline. Like it's a composite of a shit ton of people.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I'm not saying it's like, you know, like Robert Caro on like the post Britpop landscape.
Yeah.
But it is like, it's well considered and well sourced. And then it spins off into like individual opinion pieces, and the takes become progressively hotter. And in some cases, increasingly prophetic.
I think this week it's going to be mostly about what you read in the Enemy, because
you really did pull the short straw, didn't you?
Well, you texted me a picture of the cover of the Enemy this week, and I texted you back a picture of Tommy Scott in a football kit standing, and I had the thought, I was like, Graham Scott, there's more meat on your bone than there is on mine.
But don't worry, don't panic. Ain't nothing going on but history. Yeah, it's all right. Don't panic. And the music keeps on.
This week, the Melody Maker is doing a bit of a. I don't know, because I haven't just, you know, because we're jumping around in time here, so I haven't read the last 6 to 12 months worth of Melody Makers leading up to this point. So I don't know exactly when this has happened, but what has happened in the Melody Maker is they've done what seems to me to be a very self-conscious pop pivot. This is exemplified in 3 news pieces and 1 segment piece, which is mixed in with the news. First off, there's a piece on Bewitched titled "Could It Be Magic?" Which is a story about their debut single, C'est la vie, excellent song, topping the charts. For those that don't know, Bewitched were an Irish 4-piece, 2 of which were related to Shane Lynch from Boyzone. It's a very puffy piece about them doing better than they thought they'd do. And that's it, really. Like, there's no, like, taking the piss. There's no, what does this mean for music?
There's no Melody Maker meta-narrative around it.
There's no Melody Maker meta-narrative. It's just a piece about a band who got to number 1, who were hoping to get in the top 30. That's it. I don't remember there being an article like that on, I don't know, Emanate or something in like the early 90s in the Melody Maker. It just wouldn't have happened. Like, there would have been a fucking riot, like, in the letters page. The next piece I want to talk about is a kind of gossipy All Saints piece, which is about Melanie Black being pregnant, them supporting UNICEF, and just general, like, kind of state of the nation kind of stuff about, like, this is everything that's happened to All Saints in the last few weeks.
That's like proper regurgitated press release stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a mention of Booty Call, which is their next single. So we're really early in All Saints Days. It shows you how big they were, how quick they were that big. I think Booty Call is their 3rd single. But it's like of their first album. So it's a puff piece. Here's some stuff that happened to a band that just wouldn't have happened. I don't think even a year ago you would have seen this.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting reflection of the kind of the sort of deprioritization of Melody Maker by IPC.
Yeah, maybe, but also it's like, what the fuck are we going to do? What are we going to write about? I can't imagine anybody who were fans of these bands would buy a copy of the Melody Maker. I mean, maybe they would, but like, it seems like a stretch that you would want to read about. Actually, it's not that much of a stretch, but like the idea that you know, come for space, stay for Bewitched, or vice versa, seems like an odd mix to me. even though Space were a very self-consciously pop band.
Not to spoil what we were coming on to from the NME, but it is interesting and inevitable that the NME piece kind of looks at like the falling popularity of like record sales, of gig tickets, of festival tickets.
Mm-hmm.
No one is talking about what it's doing to music press circulation numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just look at our sister publication, Melody Maker, because they are fucked. Like,
but I imagine like both titles would be fucked in the circumstances, and if both titles share a publisher, then like you would just be like, right, why are we spreading our resources here?
I feel like the Melody Maker traditionally was written, kind of back in the day by and for musicians, right? This was like, trombonist needed for big band, whatever. And Holly's demo hell, and like, where they review people's demos that they sent in, and reviews of equipment still in the magazine at the back, even at this point. So they're kind of clinging onto that a bit. But yeah, it doesn't really jive with this coverage of these type of bands, I wouldn't say. The Enemy was probably bought dutifully by a lot of people. It was so popular, like decades past, in a way the Melody Maker wasn't. And it's more like the kind of paper of record for music news, and, and a real reflection of how fast paced the kind of British music scene is. I'm sure people were just buying the Enemy out of habit for many, many years. I would take a guess that the Melody Maker couldn't say the same.
It's really interesting you say that about the NME habit, and also what you were talking about earlier about kind of being exposed to the NME for like a couple of years longer. I think for me, I remember we talked about this at the time, weirdly, but the massive batch of summer/late summer NMEs this week's copy came from goes all the way up to the week before I moved to London.
Okay. Wow.
And I remember us having a conversation like at that point where it was like, this is getting hard to justify. These covers are getting really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But because we'd had like Keith Flint with a shaved head in full clown makeup one week. Then we had Marilyn Manson dressed up as a space alien the next week.
Yeah.
And a week after that, I moved to London, and I was really like, what the hell are they going to put on the cover next?
Yeah.
The covers felt like they were getting increasingly sort of shock value orientated. I think that was in direct opposition to certainly my tastes kind of developing in a more kind of like not fashion conscious, but like definitely kind of like wanting to explore something a bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, and I think also we'd gotten wise to their game. We need a constant stream of these type of bands made up of these type of people to keep our readership engaged and justify our existence. I think there was a kind of, who are they trying to sell us this week? We're close to the Terrace era, right? They were just a band that were massively hyped themselves and were kind of semi-hyped by, certainly, I believe, the NME. And the singer gave a kind of notorious interview where he literally said that his band was the greatest band ever and he was the most amazing songwriter that ever existed. As I remember, I really haven't read it in like 20-something years, so, but, they really never went anywhere. Like, and I mean nowhere, not like gay dad nowhere. I mean, like, really nowhere. So
yeah, like not a single track penetrated the top 40 nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember the Strokes on the first cover of the NME, and somebody walking into my shared living room at uni, having just bought it, holding it up and saying, "Look what they're trying to sell us this week." And we kind of was sniggering about it. But looking back, it was that iconic photo of them standing on the streets in New York. And you were just like, fuck, I mean, the music matched how cool that picture was. It sold itself well. You were just like, well, this is going to really cross over in a way that some of the bands from the last few years haven't. I know famously the Strokes didn't sell that many records compared to how many column inches they created, or how much ridiculous praise was hyped upon them by the music press all over the world, not just in the UK. But they still, there's a stroke. They still got somewhere. Like, you know what I mean?
It is crazy to me when you look at and I appreciate we are starting to veer off deep down a tangent, but when you look at the kind of the full timeline, like where we are in this issue to the Strokes is a really short period of time.
It's like they're treading water, waiting for the Strokes at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
To move on, I mean, actually, although this next news piece makes it seem like we are a million years from the Strokes, which is an even bigger state of the nation kind of piece about the Spice Girls, which takes up like half of a whole page, which is
It's like that's not 3 years before the Strokes. That's like a different generation.
Exactly. The big news, if you remember at this time, it's like Jerry Halliwell had just left. It's like a quote from the Labour MP Tony Banks about Jerry Halliwell leaving. They don't give you any context as to why he's talking about this, but it's just like that's it's like Oasis have slightly retreated, even though they're still huge. And the Spice Girls are taking up, they are the centre of the culture to some regard. I think at this point, simply by virtue of how absolutely fucking everywhere they are, just not just with the music, but film and, endless product tie-ins, they are dominating culture at the moment, but also in a way that's slightly like this has run its course now.
I feel like 1998 for the Spice Girls is 1997 for Oasis.
Yeah. But the next segment I wanted to talk about, which is tagged onto the end, is a VHS review section, written by none other than Peter Robinson, who would go on to found the website Pop Justice. So it's written in his kind of snarky, Tom Hibbert-esque kind of way. Yeah, it's very funny, just like he is. He really lays into like M people, and there's a Stereophonics video where he talks about when they're introducing promos, where he talks about their complete lack of personality and they're really just could obviously rather be doing fucking anything than introducing clips of whatever local boy in the photograph, like a 30-minute VHS that they're trying to sell. But it's weird that he also reviews the VHS for Spice World, the movie, which they must have really shortened that sell-through, that sort of theatrical release to sell-through window on that.
Yeah, fuck yeah. But I bet that's like you give it 4 weeks, a theatrical release, and it's like, right, we need to box this up and start shifting.
Well, also, if you think about their first single came out in 96, right? And then they have a movie, and then it's out on VHS by summer of 98. I mean, it's just, they're going along ahead of a clip. No wonder that film was an incoherent mess. And he describes, really interestingly, Spice World, the movie, VHS, as an interesting artifact, which I think he kind of means it's very of the time. Do you know what I mean? This is like it describes it like a time capsule. All in all, I think those 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, reflect, I don't know if I'd use the word crisis, but things aren't perhaps going the way that they want them to in terms of music. But anyway, I kind of wanted to tie these all together with a live review of Garbage, which is them at Brixton Academy, which is a complete takedown called Where There's Muck, There's Crass, which is written by Daniel Booth. And just drawing the line from everything I was just talking about, I want to read this rather long quote here, where he talks about Shirley Manson, who's Garbage's lead singer. So he says, I've had my doubts about Shirley Manson ever since she slagged off Wannabe on the Joe Wiley show. Ginger's emigration from Spice World would still be headline news, even if Shirley blew up Buckingham Palace tomorrow. Pick on someone your own size, Shirley. Vanilla, perhaps. Now, for context, Garbage they're 5-piece, I want to say. Alternative rock band with Shirley Manson at the front, and Butch Vig, like the kind of band figurehead who produced, amongst other things, Nevermind by Nirvana. Vanilla, who are referenced in this review, were kind of like a very unsuccessful Spice Girls ripoff. Girl band.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was really having to rack my brains for who Vanilla was.
Yeah. He also, for some bizarre reason, he brings up Richie Edwards, And at the end, I think just to use this line, which he says, Richie was for real. Shirley is just forgettable.
I really want to see someone carve forgettable into their arm.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm making too much of this, but just the fact that he really fucking attacks her for attacking Jerry Halliwell, it just seems like a kind of out with the old, in with the new. I mean, it's an easy target, really. I don't know if, I mean, he talks a lot about their fans sort of being sad old men who just like.
That's fascinating because that was never my perception of their fan base.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my perception of their fan base was it was sad young women.
He says that's also what they are.
Interestingly, I've not covered it in my notes because of just all the oxygen being taken up by the cover feature. But Garbage are also the live lead review in the NME this week, and they also get a proper kicking.
Okay. I mean, maybe people are just sick of Garbage at this point. But
I mean, what are they? They're on their second album at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange to me that Garbage would elicit such an extreme reaction.
I don't know. Maybe it's more about the brevity of this issue. But I'm reading these quite breezy puff pieces about these pop bands, and then 20 pages later, they're just like ripping apart like Garbage, who are I don't know. Maybe they would have been friendlier to in another era, but I mean, I don't know.
The whiplash is, I guess, pretty strong if you've just waded through like 20 pages of adverts and rehashed press releases, and then you get to an old school Melody Maker hatchet job. So the much trailed cover story in the NME this week, the great rock and roll Dwindle, fair play, that's a pretty cool bump. British music in crisis, and this is like a 4-page article in itself, which then turns into 2 1-page interviews with 2 different record label bosses. And then finally a 2-page feature in which Johnny Cigarettes goes on a road trip to northern cities to take the temperature of their music scenes.
Okay.
So without further ado, you've got this concept that the enemy are pushing really hard this week of British music being in crisis. And it's really interesting, like how timeless some of these complaints are, but also some of the patterns are really familiar. And I'll leave it a bit before I get into a direct comparison. But there is another creative industry, not the music industry, which I think is going through a really similar phase to what the enemy believes British music was going through in the summer of 1998.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me that this is probably one of the earliest recorded appearances of the concept of the attention economy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the person pitching this notion is a guy called Ben Wardle, who ran Indolent Records, which was Sleeper's record label.
Oh, yeah.
So for anyone unfamiliar with the notion of the attention economy, it's the concept that businesses, especially media businesses or content businesses, if we have to call them that now, are primarily competing for people's free time and their attention rather than money. And you can see that reflected in the gravity attached to metrics like views, likes, monthly active users, like particularly in terms of streaming music, skip rates. But all those metrics are a reflection of we are valuing people's attention over anything else.
Well put.
And yeah, the key point to kick this off that Sleeper's record label boss is making is that there is a glut of cultural product in the marketplace that is strangling music. There are so many books you're supposed to read. There are so many films or videos you're supposed to watch. There are so many records you're supposed to hear, which in a pre-internet age is utterly quaint.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I'd love to see how he feels about culture now.
I mean, we're not quite pre-internet, are we? I think.
Yeah, pre-internet is misleading because we are literally going to get into internet commentary within a couple of pages.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, but it's not. It's not at like. I mean, I'm sure you were using the internet. Were you using the internet every day in '98, or not?
No.
Not yet.
Definitely not 98. I've got a vague memory of going with you to an internet cafe in Guildford, circa 97, maybe.
Okay. Wow. I don't remember
And that maybe 96.
Okay.
And we sat there and we looked at like extremely rudimentary websites and bulletin boards for artists we were interested in.
Okay.
I've got a memory of looking at like kind of like set lists for Husker Du gigs from the 80s while you were scrolling through an encyclopedia of Beastie Boys bootlegs.
It scans. I'll tell you that. That sounds about right.
It's entirely believable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this notion being kind of pushed like, up front that like there is this like abundance of culture, an abundance of media, and music is losing out on this. This is backed up by A&M's recently fired MD, which I find is quite grimly funny talking head to include. It's like, this guy's proof the record industry's fucked. He just lost his job. And he makes a point, which I think taps into something we were talking about earlier. His view is like hardcore music fans are still there and they're still buying records. But that kind of casual music customer who had their interest sparked by Oasis, Blur, stuff like that, has moved on. His quote is, the casual's buying football gear, he's buying beer, he's taking girls out, he's buying PlayStation games, which is, some pretty broad brush strokes, but
seems true. Seems
that's
potentially true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's that's the key thing here. It's that music does not hold as central a place in British culture as it did in like 95 and 96.
When did the PlayStation come out? 95?
Yeah, it's 95 or 96 in the UK.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then it really, it took off pretty much immediately, but it does reach kind of a ubiquity in like 97.
Yeah, it's 97 when you have Wipeout and like Designers Republic, and it's like, it goes like from being like, oh, this is interesting to this is really cool.
Yeah, not September 95, it comes out in Europe. Yeah, no, Wipeout came out as a launch title. Yeah, Tekken also is 95. Yeah. Anyway, you keep going. Sorry, I'm going to stop Googling.
I don't want to encourage you to just pull up PlayStation release date. but when's Tomb Raider? Because that's another big
there you go.
Game intersection.
There you go. Okay, Tomb Raider's October 96. Doesn't quite make the point you're trying to make. It's not like it was like, came out on the 13th of June, 1998. But
people traded in their copies of Be Here Now for the Tomb Raider release.
I would argue that back in the day, there was more of a sense of things gathering steam than there was of something being released and it being consumed by everybody in like a very short amount of time and then being dropped. Would you argue with that? Would you say that sounds about right?
No, I think it's a reflection of what you were talking about with the monoculture.
Okay.
Like, it's the idea that to like turn an oil tanker in a direction is not the work of an instant.
Okay.
So things need to build up cultural momentum, and do that gradually.
Okay.
Whereas, like, I don't know, I'm sure this could be picked apart very quickly, but it feels like it is both harder and easier to be an overnight sensation.
Yeah.
Harder because there is so much competition for that attention. Easier because the modes of transmission are much more accessible.
Yes, very true. But also, you can have a completely different metric of success now. You could say you're a successful podcast and reach like under 10,000 people. We probably both listen to podcasts that reach like a few thousand people listen to every week, which is a very small amount of people. I can't think of many things that I consumed in the mid to late 90s that were only being consumed by about 3,000 people. Even a band like Symposium, who potentially, who probably never left the realms of in at number 26 one week, out the next week. There's no slight on them. They were just one of those types of bands that were probably, they had a very they had a fevered live following. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say? But they
the
were
sort of band where like you play Portsmouth Wedgwood Bruins and 70% of the people there have bought your record and will buy the next one.
Yeah, Symposium were the 98 equivalent of somebody listening to a podcast that's super niche, that's listened to by a few thousand people.
So we've got the basic kind of like thesis set out. We've got this kind of proto-attention economy theory from Sleeper's record label.
Yeah.
And we've got the kind of the truism music, and particularly alternative music, in 1998 does not have the same sort of cultural footprint it did in 95, 96 when like Blur and Oasis are uniting the nation. So then the article moves into its kind of almost like it's supporting evidence on a case by case, on a theme by theme basis.
This is where Dr. John comes in.
Those warm fuzzy feelings. So the first point, the enemy wants to land. I stress again that this article does not have a single byline on it. It seems to be like the enemy brain trust has united to herald the fall of British music. Well, the first point they want to land is, and I quote the title of the section directly, pops in bits and pieces.
Okay.
There's the acknowledgement that at this point, despite the enemy's best efforts, there is no kind of iconic era-defining scene for a movement to kind of gather around.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice try with skunk rock.
Yeah,
mate.
yeah,
You tried your best.
Yeah.
And because of that lack of a scene or infrastructure, that puts a challenge on alternative acts having space to develop, or having rather a safe space to develop.
Okay.
And that goes in tandem with the kind of the fallout from a success of Oasis. I've got quite a lot of sympathy for this point of view. They're trying to land the point that the consequence of the success of Oasis is that expectations by the average record label for the success that's attainable for what's, like still conceptually like alternative guitar music are completely out of whack.
Yeah.
Like people are not managing their expectations on the record label side. That's reflected by like this horrendous sort of chain of consequences. It means that when an act gets a lot of hype, like you are instantly getting into bidding wars between labels. And as soon as an act is identified as being the next big thing, then like the kind of the offers being fielded by different labels are like just spiral, like out of control.
Do they give any examples of this?
You know what? I feel like they're really trying hard not to say embrace.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone interviewed, like there are some quite forthright opinions throughout this, but I would say that one thing that is really noticeable is that the article is willing to highlight acts that have been dropped and kind of label them as casualties of the system.
Okay.
But the article is quite squeamish about labeling anyone as a symptom of the system. What the point they're landing here is that you've got these huge inflated advances being attached to artists, but there's a twofold challenge with that sort of inflated level of investment. One part is you don't have space for development. If you put that much money into an act, then like, by the second single, if it's not on a kind of rocket ship trajectory, then you probably need to cut your losses. For anyone who's not au fait with kind of pre-digital focus record contracts, what would often happen is that an artist or a band would be signed for a pretty significant headline number. The headline number is what gets like kind of the attention, whether it's kind of within the industry, within kind of competing sort of managers and competing artists, and occasionally within the press when you're trying to shape a kind of press narrative about this act is so hot they commanded like a 500K advance. However, the reality of those advances is that that is normally the kind of the gross total, and in what's the word? In practice, those advances, you're not just going to give £500,000 to like 4 mumbling white guys. Like, you're going to safeguard yourself. So there will be X amount accessible to record demos. There'll be X amount accessible for, a series of singles. And then there may well be a big payment made on release of an album, and then maybe a back end payment when the album passes a certain sales threshold. So the idea that like, you sign a deal and like the label just writes you a check, unless you've like got some absolute genius manager and an absolute mug of a record label, it doesn't happen like that. And this is part of the motivation for labels dropping bands very early on if they're underperforming. If you have paid through the nose or committed like to a really inflated advance, but you've given yourself bailout options, then you are going to take them. But the other aspect of that inflated investment, and I think this is a problem that comes in and out of fashion with the UK music industry, is that the UK market is of a finite size. There comes a point where you are past a level of investment where simply being big in the UK is enough to sustain that deal. So that means you've got to be out there, and you've got to be like, kind of having a productive like career trajectory on the international stage.
Yes, you have to break America.
Yeah, which UK bands are notoriously bad at doing, right? Because breaking America is incredibly draining physically and mentally, because UK bands are used to being in a van going from London to Birmingham or Birmingham to Manchester. And all of a sudden they realize they've got like an 18-hour drive between gigs.
Yeah, also English people are bad at selling themselves.
Yes.
Which Americans are very good at. And it almost seems rude not to sell yourself. Do you know what I mean? So yes.
Yeah, it's like perceived as like standoffish, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's such a cliche. You and I grew up reading stories of bands, in Nowheresville, America, playing to 2 people and a dog, and like having to kiss the arse of some radio DJ or plugger or something like that, and they just thought it was demeaning and they didn't want to do it, and all this sort of shit.
Yeah.
Probably because when they weren't famous and they weren't indie famous, they were thinking, I'm going to be in a band, it's going to do well, and I'm never going to have to do anything I don't want to do ever again. And they've had loads of smoke blown up their arse by the Enemy and the Melody Maker. They've done pretty well in the UK, and then they go off to America. 90% of it is a slog that they really were just like, this is awful, and I'm having to do this every single day. It always sounded quite fun to me, but like, what do I know?
There's a point the article makes which on first reading didn't really sink in, but while we're talking it's bubbled back to the surface, and that's that the circumstances of the UK market with a weekly music press and a broadly supportive national radio station, like that accelerates everyone's like level of exposure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and it doesn't really exist in other countries, whether that's North America or Europe. North America at this point, the Clinton administration has pushed through the relaxation of radio ownership and programming legislation. Basically kills off college radio and alternative radio. So breaking an alternative act in America gets like objectively harder from like, I think it's 96 onwards. Anyway, I think that's the deepest we've gone into the kind of the mechanics of the music industry so far.
Yeah, I think that's all well put and very, very true. It's like everything works great when everything's working great, basically. And then when things aren't working so well, you're just like, fuck, this system's crazy. Like,
yeah, it's like the classic boom and bust thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
like it's like, oh man, like fucking, you know the Simpsons episode with Disco Stew and his projection of disco
Yeah,
records?
yeah, that's the record industry over and over and over again. Yeah. Yeah.
If I had any sort of Photoshop skills, I would make a version of that with Disco Stew with like a bowl cut and a cagoule.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in summary, you've got the first point about there's no era defining scene, and acts are really struggling to find space to develop because fundamentally they have been given too much money because of a hype-ridden grassroots industry. The second point the article tries to land, like they switch gears halfway through, even though they're actually kind of making quite a good point. The subheading is that superstardom is now uncool. And I think it's a really valid point that in 1998, like there is a counter reaction to the approach of Oasis and the ethos of Britpop. And fundamentally, that's that artists are less interested in playing to the crowd. The article cites people like Radiohead, like Massive Attack. So Radiohead are riding off the success of OK Computer at this point. Massive Attack are coming off Mezzanine. Pulp have just released This Is Hardcore and torpedoed their career.
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting, not to go on this a bit, but people like Radiohead and Massive Attack who, you know, quote unquote, got where they were by playing by their own rules. They're like, that's a real unicorn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most people get where they are by playing by the rules. It just kind of seems like they're not because they all have personalities, but it's like, it's the same fucking grind everyone has to do.
Yeah, I mean, like, playing by your own rules is a very malleable notion.
Yes, and obviously Radiohead, that basically means playing by everyone else's rules and complaining about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not complaining to the point where you're like, yeah, you're right. Maybe multi-format CD singles are a bad idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got this turn against, the kind of the accessible or even sort of open desire to be popular. Interestingly, the article points out the Verve basically threw a massive strop and refused to go on stage to accept their awards. I think that year's Brat Awards.
Okay.
Which feels more like a vendetta against the Verve than any objective judgment. Like, you fucked up our award ceremony. We're going to call you out.
My friend and me, looking through her red box of memories.
Yeah, anyway, this superstardom is now on call section, then shifts gears fairly incoherently into complaining about there being too many festivals and too many new bands releasing too many singles.
Yeah, wow. I mean,
so, yeah, it's
not by a
hard.
long shot have we reached that point.
Like, again, it's like, you have no idea what's coming, do you? I think there's a specific reference that there used to be 3 festivals. We had Glastonbury, the Metal Pits had Donington, and then there was Reading for like the in-betweeners. And now there's these V's, there's Phoenix, there's Guildfest.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I find it fascinating that we grew up in the Guildford area and never once went to Guildfest.
Yeah. Well, it's not that. I mean, I remember looking at the lineups and thinking, like, I don't want to see any of these people.
You didn't want to see the Levelers or James.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So there's too much stuff.
Yeah, there is too much stuff. There are too many festivals. There are too many bands, and those bands are releasing too many singles. Also, it's all Radio 1's fault.
Do they also say the stuff that's being released is not that good?
Kind of, but without wanting to say that out loud too much. We'll come to that. Our third kind of element that's screwing this all up is that it's all Radio 1's fault because Radio 1 can't decide if it's pop or new music. Which, I mean, I can see why Melody Maker's not making that complaint on the basis of your insight so far.
Yeah.
But one thing that I found really interesting about this is that a key criticism from a lot of people, and Gary Walker from Ouija Records had a specific kind of example of this, is that because there are so many records being released and people are so desperate to break the new acts that they have hugely overinvested in, pluggers are in this kind of arms race to get tracks played on the radio. And one of the tools they use to kind of accelerate like uptake of their tracks is offering Radio 1 exclusives, like an exclusive first play. And as part of the arms race, it means that tracks are getting played earlier and earlier before release.
Okay.
To the point where, I mean, my memory on this is pretty spotty. But one of the complaints is that records are being played so early that by the time they're actually available to buy, people are sick of them. They've had enough of them.
As somebody who had MTV back in the day, I can say that is 100% correct. Because I didn't listen to much Radio
Interesting.
1, but I watched hours of MTV every single day. And I was going to murder somebody if I heard "Stay" by Bernard Butler one more fucking time. Do you know what I mean? Because it was tedious enough the first time, but for like months, I swear to God, months before it actually, you see the advert, you're like, hang on a minute, this hasn't come out yet. Like, you know, yeah, good God. That was very of the era. We are so, I mean, once you can't play anything without existing forever now. That option has just gone. So yeah, back in the day, you certainly could, and you had no choice to listen. Well, you could turn off the radio or the TV, or listen or watch it. Those were your two choices.
Yeah. Well, the interesting example that the guy from Ouija Records mentions is that the Norman Cook remix, "A Brimful of Asher" by Cornish Dot, their attitude was, this is a club record. We have made this record as a white label to distribute to club DJs.
Yeah.
And then Radio 1 hear about it, and it goes from C to B to A-list. And he mentions that they literally had to speak to Radio 1 and say, please stop playing this record until we've figured out how to commercially release it.
Yeah.
You've put this record on the A-list, and we don't even have a single campaign sorted out at this point.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. And also, our guy from Ouija Records is pretty upfront about the fact that when he spoke to Radio 1 and explained the situation with this Brimful of Asher remix, Radio 1 cooperated fully. They were like, okay, fine, we'll back off. We love this record though, so when you're ready, we're on this. And it worked because it went to number one.
Yeah. Yes. And it's just stayed in the public consciousness ever since.
And I think at the time, this was unremarkable to me. It was like, well, that Corner Shop album is good, and this remix is by an extremely hot dance producer.
Yeah.
So why would it not get to number one?
Yeah.
Having had the opportunity to see the coverage of Corner Shop from 1993
Yeah.
that we in a previous episode, I get why some people were flabbergasted this happened.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we've mentioned this before, but this is like the ultimate teenagers experiencing culture in a complete fucking vacuum. No context for anything, or very little context for anything that didn't immediately just happen.
Yeah, because there's no paper trail.
There's no paper trail. Exactly.
Like you have no way of learning about you can learn about 20 years ago pretty easily, but you are not learning about 3 years ago.
I had, when I was at school, do you remember when the Enemy used to print you would have probably done the exact same thing. Do you remember when the Enemy used to print discographies in the back?
Yes.
So for bands that I liked, I'd cut them out and stuck them on my art folder. Those discographies, as I'm sure you know, were woefully incomplete. Like you've got, and that's not to criticize anyone at the Enemy, but you got a smattering of what there was. I wish I still had it. I have the Beastie Boys one. I had it memorized, so that when I went into a record store, I knew I'm missing this. I'm looking for this record today because Love American Style EP, whatever it was. I don't have this yet. This is going to be today's day. Yeah, and you couldn't just go on Spotify or Discogs or Wikipedia or whatever and just be or YouTube and just systematically go through everything. my son is 15. His friends that are like music heads have incredible depth of knowledge about music that they're into. They have massive gaps. A couple of his friends are really into hip hop. One of them once talked to me about the new Lil Wayne album. He asked me, I shit you not. He said, "What was it like when the Carter 3 came out?"
Tell me about the war.
Are you trying to make me feel literally like the oldest man that ever lived? Because the Carter 3, are you kidding? And I was like,
So that came out last week, son. What are you talking about?
And I started talking about his mixtapes, and he was from that time, and he was like, "Yeah, I really like the Drought 3," and I was like, "Yeah, that's the one. That's the one everyone says. Like, that's the like." He knew all those, and he was piling on the new Lil Wayne album, really shitting on it, which I hadn't bothered to listen to it, but I'd heard it wasn't great.
Yeah.
So for some, and I was like, he must have learned all of this in an evening. He's just downloaded this information into his head. I was on holiday like a few years ago with another one of his, with a family, and they had a son the same age, super into music, super into hip hop. One of his favorite artists, MF Doom. This kid's like 13. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not holding up MF Doom as being like, for the real heads, this is the shit. If you like, keep digging, one day you'll fucking find this if you're lucky. My point is, it's not like he said, I did like Drake, now I like Kendrick or something, which would have been as far as you may have been able to go back in the day at that age. He leapfrogged all of that and gone straight to, if you're really serious about this, you need to get into these artists. And he zeroed in on MF Doom.
I think someone like MF Doom, and to a degree Lil Wayne, is super interesting for how. What's your son and his mate's generation? Is that Gen Alpha, or are they still nominally Gen Z?
They're not. The end of Gen Z. My daughter is Gen Alpha. There's a huge difference between my daughters and her friends and the way they are, and my son and his friends. It's almost night and day.
That's hilarious. Your son is going to be stuck in the same position we find ourselves between millennials and Gen X.
Yes, as a millennial, yeah.
So, all of that said, we've gone through the reasons for the great rock and roll dwindle. We've talked about this proto-attention economy concept. There's the fragmentation of pop culture. There's the combined Trojan horse of no one wants to be a superstar. And also there's too many festivals, too many bands, and too many records.
Yeah.
Radio 1 being an incoherent mess. And I'm going to mention Gary Walker from Ouija Records again. Like, obviously he's riding pretty high at this point. He's an entirely independent label that's just had a #1 single with Corner Shop. So he is a person worth listening to, the enemy feels. I think they are right to listen to him, even if he is unaware of the train hurtling down the tracks towards him. Basically, the kind of the outcome of all this is like, the things are pretty screwed. Like, the music industry in Britain is in a bad way. But the sort of central thesis is that the way out is to look at artists as long-term investments. Gary from Ouija again cites Corner Shop, and I think he's hitting the nail on the head with this. He says they were a mess when we signed them, but what we saw was there was a spark worth nurturing.
Okay.
Like, we wanted to support them through touring. We wanted to support them through developing like who they were as a band. And through that, we've now got a #1 single and a top 10 album on their 4th attempt at making an album.
Yeah, can I just say the most obnoxious record industry shit ever? Most bands pre-signing are shit. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would go with that.
A lot of them need a bit of help. Like, do you know what I mean? And that could just be money and time. That could be money and time, and someone dropping by every week and saying, "Hey, not that one, that one." Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, you should be concentrating on this part of what you do. Yeah, because as Gary quite rightly points out, most bands are a bit of a mess before they sign and don't have their shit together or a particularly coherent plan. And to be honest, some bands who are a mess and don't have a coherent plan are fucking great because that's part of their thing.
Yeah, this is not a novel opinion. and I always think of the first Dizzy Rascal album, Boy in the Corner, as like the apex of this. But sometimes not having a fucking clue what the rules are or what the parameters are for how you record music or how music is supposed to be structured
Yes.
is the biggest asset an artist has.
Absolutely.
Sleep on the left side, leave the right side free. Hope gets salted as those around you leave.
In the Melody Maker this week, in a way that I think neatly dovetails with what you've been describing from what the enemy is covering, there is not one but two pieces on the official World Cup, England official World Cup 98 song from, do you remember what this is?
Is this the song that's Ian McCulloch and the Spice
That's
Girls?
exactly what it is. How does it feel to be, in parenthesis, on top of the world? And the band name that they go under is England United. It's a fucking mess. It's written by not only Ian McCulloch, but Johnny Marr. I had no idea about that. I'd completely forgotten that. It features, as you say, the Spice Girls. It also features like two other guest vocalists are Simon Fowler from Ocean Colour Scene and Tommy Scott from Space.
Did they just kidnap a bunch of people from the Met Bar toilets?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to look because I was just like, hang on, all these people just fucking signed to Universal. Is this not early Machiavellian Lucian Grange? Like,
To be fair, I think at this point, Lucian Grange, if memory serves, is running V2 Records and getting ready to sign Kings of Convenience.
okay, well, if he's running V2, then he's involved with some of these artists. But this song, I actually re-listened to it just out of interest. I watched the video. There's not really much to say about the song. Like, it's
I can't wait to hear how you edit it in the background.
in terms of a piece of music, the best word I could use to describe it is turgid. I'm not like, as you well know, we do not make a habit on this podcast of just giving like songs or artists a kicking. I think everybody in this can take it, frankly, and also the general memory, if anybody has one, of this song is that it's a bit dull and unmemorable. And in fact, Mel C described it as it's a top tune, but it's not like it's memorable. So
What?
that's in one of the two articles promoting the song. And in fact, in the Space one, Jamie from Space says it's shit. Tommy was a bit reluctant to do it, but we convinced him before we'd even heard it. So, yeah, as you may or may not recall, this is the year of Vindaloo by Fat Les, and it's also the year that Three Lions is re-released, because obviously they did it for the Euros in '96, but then they released Three Lions '98 because of now we're in the World Cup.
I forgot this is the start of like Ian Brody and Baddiel and Skinner's like versioning approach to Three Lions.
So, yeah, it's been 2 years, but I think already, I mean, Three Lions is so ubiquitous. Vindaloo was so weird by Fat Les. It's just like I don't know. Oh yeah, there's a fourth one as well. Chumbawamba also released a World Cup single at this time.
I didn't realize this until I read a very surprisingly well written biography on Joe Strummer. But Joe Strummer is all over Vindaloo.
Really?
Yeah, it's like one of his last, like I think it's his last chart success.
That's like half the book on the
Yeah, the Vindaloo story.
And Keith Allen said, "Let's call it Vindaloo."
I mean, the book is written by someone who is like a close friend of Joe Strummer from like the early 70s onwards.
Yeah.
When you get into the kind of like late 80s, early 90s, like the tone of the book really changes to then Joe fell in with these assholes like Keith Allen.
Exhibit A, Vindaloo.
Yeah, it's like these assholes just like did cope with him and got him pissed all the time and were excited to be hanging out with Joe Strummer.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think, I don't really want to say much about this track, but what I do want to say, having re-listened to it, it sounds like the track is very kind of mid-90s, like mainstream indie. It's got horns and fucking stupid nonsensical chorus about vaguely feeling good about something.
Being on top of the world, perchance.
Yeah, it feels the music itself even feels like a bit done. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've done this now. Like, we need to move on. Like, something else needs to come and replace this, because this is not working anymore. Interestingly, this is the last of their peak period. This is the last Spice Girls track that Geri Halliwell will appear on. She looks truly like she'd rather be doing anything else than be in the music video.
I vividly remember a story around that track's announcement in the NME, and there was a still from the video, and it somehow managed to have Ian McCulloch in like massive long coat, like coiffed hair and shades on, like with a microphone, and the Spice Girls with Geri Halliwell very noticeably smiling like a fucking hostage.
She's no longer smiling in the video, I can tell you that. And they say when the track was played at Wembley, it was booed. So yeah, the people agreed this song is shit. But then again, some very defensive comments on YouTube. There's just lots of people saying over and over again, I actually really like this song. This is just, reminds me of an amazing time in my life, and da, 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 da.
User account Ian McCulloch 61. And the fact you've heard it, did you have to go YouTube digging, or is it on DSPs?
You know what? I know it's on DSPs because somebody in the comments said, finally available on Spotify. But no, I watched the video on YouTube because I remembered the promo. Again, it's one of those promos I saw 1,000 fucking times. Yeah, I just watched it and was like, yep, this is exactly how I remember it. Like, kid versions of each person, including Simon Fowler, like morphing into the adult version of them. It's fucking awful. Yeah, even McCulloch says at one point, I haven't heard the song yet, to be honest. People have said it's really good, and I'm sure it is. I mean,
I'm really intrigued by how much they were paying everyone for this, because no one sounds like massively enthusiastic about it.
He wrote it. Halfway through was clearly like, fuck, this isn't working. Like, laid down his vocals and just left. Like, and be like, call me when we have to do the video.
Like, Johnny, can you fix this?
Yes, but it's still got to number 9. So,
Really?
yeah, exactly. So it's still sold pretty well. Yeah, of course, because that was just this sort of, it was just got played on Radio 1, everybody heard it, and they were like, I guess I like this and I'll buy this. Like, this was the way you bought singles, wasn't it, back in the day? So I might want to hear this some other time than on the radio, so I'll pay £2 for the CD.
I remember it being regarded as having flopped, but in my head that was because it had got to something like 27, not number 9.
Yeah, so it sold 94,000 copies.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's an insane amount of physical singles.
Yeah, and on the most 90s thing I've ever heard, said the song was first performed live on TFI Friday on the 1st of May 1998. Sorry, just while I want this is on the wiki page. It says that Ian Wright and Rio Ferdinand described it as bollocks and rubbish, respectively. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of quotes from people calling it shit, but like just all the ones from people actually involved saying it's shit at the time, being interviewed to promote the single release, saying it's shit, who got the cover to talk about it. It's just mind-boggling.
That cover, just to go back to it, like Tommy Scott doesn't look particularly well on that cover. He is the only person from the lineup for that record that is on the cover.
Yeah, also, they have underneath him, it says, it's coming home, it's coming home. It's the rock and roll guide to World Cup. So it's like they're quoting another more popular song in the cover story to promote his song. Interesting. Yeah, anyway, we've talked now for longer than anyone in the history of the world has ever talked about that song.
Coming back to the crisis gripping British music in summer 1998, we have Alan McGee's words of wisdom.
What's he done with all that Oasis money?
It's a great question. I know what he's not done with it, because The headline here is there'll be no record labels in 5 to 10 years. I mean, we could spend a whole episode talking about this, but we're not going to do that. The brief summary would be that Alan McGee predicts big parts of the future with an almost Nostradamus-like accuracy, and then takes exactly the wrong lessons from that future.
Okay.
So he opens with the premise that nobody's buying records, and I feel sorry for the act he throws under the bus to illustrate his point. We've seen them live before in Brighton many years
Is it
ago.
England United?
Sitting on the bottom of the charts. No, Alan McGee has heard about the hip and happening Monkey Mafia,
Okay.
who have just released their debut album. And in Alan's words, it's supposed to be hot right now. And yeah, they had first week sales totaling 1,637 copies.
Yeah.
Which earned them a chart placing of
Those are
69.
2025 numbers.
Yeah, exactly. That's top 10 in 2025. And he contrasts that with the album at number 1 that week. New entry at number 1. First week sales of 30,000 copies. It's Catatonia.
Okay. International Velvet.
Yes. He concludes that no one is buying records, which, to be fair, if you are Alan McGee and you have seen Oasis numbers, I can see how 30,000 records wouldn't be very exciting.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But don't worry, Alan is in touch with the kids. He knows what's coming. He thinks there's no rebellion in music anymore. You'll have the same record collection as your dad, as your uncle, and there's no rebellion in
Is
music.
he about to mention Three Colours Red? That's a band that stood for something, damn it.
Funnily enough, Three Colours Red do not feature in this diatribe.
Okay. Now, there's an example of a band who didn't sell many records and was supposed to.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I hope we get a chance to talk about them at
We will.
at some point,
Definitely.
because there's something I noticed about their lineup which has commonality with Blur, with Muse. It's really interesting. Anyway, according to Alan, there's no rebellion in music anymore. But if you're 15 and you buy a laptop, I don't know how you're finding the
I was
money
gonna
to
say.
buy a laptop age 15 in 1998. Then your mum doesn't even know how to turn it on.
That's correct.
That I mean, that is correct. But in Alan McGee's world, that is also rock and roll.
Yeah. Listen, give him some credit. That's kind of right.
He is right, but also the bad faith reading that rock and roll is a confused middle-aged woman trying to turn on an electronic device is questionable.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah.
However, he then goes on make a bold statement, which I've got a lot of sympathy for, but it's probably worthy of a little discussion. All great music is created from a generation gap. Like, I think if you are viewing the world with a perspective rooted in British indie and British punk, then maybe that feels valid.
Well, he is the punk generation. So he's like, my life was changed when I heard The Clash or whatever. Yeah. So I can see why he'd say that. That's often a criticism of not just that was often a criticism of not just the British music scene, but British music fans and the British music press, that they're forever waiting for the next punk.
I wonder how much of it is that people talk about punk kind of clearing the decks of musical culture in the UK in terms of artists and how they approach their work. I think there's a lot of truth in that, but it's not just artists. It's also the entire kind of infrastructure of how people kind of cover and talk about and theorize the artists as well.
Very true.
So punk doesn't just reset the artists, it resets the cultural commentary around music.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you see, like, really, like, hard coded in the system, like, still in 1998. That, like, the notions of, like, the punk ethos being a good thing has, like, still survived the idea of Three Nights at Nebworth.
And also the personal commitment it would have taken to be a punk in 1977 or 78 or something. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. I know there are lots of people that like just gelled their hair up or whatever, but I'm sure walking down the street, you would have, you know what I mean? You would have encountered some hostility. You would have felt like you were part of an important cultural movement, maybe not one that perhaps had a coherent ideology. But you certainly would have felt anti-establishment in a way that you would not have done walking down the street wearing an Oasis t-shirt, listening to What's the Story, Morning Glory.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like, to talk to the people I know who were sort of, you know, who were adopting that lifestyle at the time. I mean, particularly because, like, the people I know who were there doing that, they weren't in, like, Bromley, and they weren't in, like, London. They were in Belfast.
Okay, yeah.
At the height of the Troubles. There's statements and there's statements. That is a wild time to make yourself as, like, abrasively noticeable as possible. So yeah, Alan McGee has this notion that all great music is created from a generation gap, but he goes on, computers and computer games are that generation gap now. And this is a wonderful Alan McGee quote: "Going into HMV, or especially our price, has got to be the least sexy thing a young person can do."
Yeah, depends how they go in there, I guess. But
what are they wearing and how are they?
Exactly.
Then I'll judge that statement.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But he follows up with a close to home example. In 10 years' time, Oasis or Primal Scream won't be on record labels. I mean, Primal Scream's case, that's probably because they'll have been dropped.
And Oasis was split up, but yeah.
So he was right on both counts. But they know their fan base and they're going to download albums straight to them for £10 a shot. I mean, he's kind of predicting Bandcamp there. Is like the kind of the most positive spin I can give on that statement.
Yeah, or in Rainbows.
Yeah. Like, and yeah, I think In Rainbows predates Bandcamp. So yeah,
by
that's probably,
years. Yeah.
That's probably the more appropriate comparison. But yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, fair play.
In fact, In Rainbows is what 9 years after this is written.
I think it's worth pointing out that he has just said that in 10 years' time, the two bands that probably, in Alan McGee's perspective, define Creation Records, his label, Oasis, who have like kind of like been his like kind of commercial crown jewel, and Primal Scream, the group he's worked with the longest and probably feels the closest affinity to. He's talking about like how in 10 years' time they won't be on record labels. They have always been on his record label. And it is worth pointing out that within 18 months of this piece, Creation Records doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, anyway, so Alan McGee predicts the In Rainbows model in terms of Spawn, the Bandcamp model. And this is where he starts to... Yeah, the message starts to become blurred at this point. So this is the revolution. Cut out the record label middleman and go straight to fans at a cheaper price. I mean, yeah. There'll always be music, but how and where you get your songs is changing. And it's such a huge change that no one in the music industry is brave enough to fucking say it. I quote. But I feel like that is quite an interesting statement. I don't know about you, but I wasn't really conscious of that digital distribution sea change coming in at this point in time. But I was excited about reissue CDs and older vinyl and box sets.
I remember watching an episode of The Big Breakfast where they had like a technology corner. It was like Tomorrow's World, that somebody brought on like an early MP3 player, and they were saying this could hold like, I don't remember how many hours of music it was, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that. And I was like, I had the same reaction they had, the presenters who were talking. I was just like, oh, fuck it. It was just like, just mind-bogglingly far away from what I could comprehend, any way I could comprehend, like listening to music. Do you know what I mean? And then my next biggest, maybe like the Aphex Twin album Drugs, which comes out in 2001. So a few years away from this, is famously compiled of tracks that were on an MP3 player that he lost on a plane, that he was like, fuck, I need to release all this shit because someone's going to find it. And then, I don't know whether that's a classic, like Aphex Twin, just some shit that he said to like, but it made him look like really at the kind of technological vanguard that he had an MP3 player to begin with, that he took one around with him, listening to his own music that he'd made on a computer and then put onto this device, which also I had a nebulous understanding of what it was. I knew what MP3s were because I downloaded them all the fucking time and listened on the computer at that stage. But I had yet to yet to join the dots up to where this was all going in terms of, the cliche thing of iPod being the new Beatles, that was just right around the corner.
Can you remember when you first downloaded music off the internet?
Yeah, I was massively into the whole bastard pop thing. Yeah, and that music kind of really lived on the internet. Like Boom Selection, obviously, was a big website that people used to go to, the McSleazy forums, all that stuff. And it was all about trading MP3s. And that music would not have been possible to make without MP3. So that was my introduction to it. And then I quickly was like, I can fucking download. Like, I just almost stopped. I stopped buying all but stuff I found really interesting in terms of music, like almost overnight. If I wanted to hear the new album by some band I was vaguely interested in but didn't really give a fuck about, was slightly embarrassed to listen to, I would just download the album, listen to it, probably before it came out, and then just delete the MP3s.
I remember by the second year of uni, that was the point where I think we started using the internet more and more. So 99 into 2000. I can't remember what the first file sharing platform I used was. But MP3 blogs were a huge thing for both of us. I remember
that was much later. Audio Galaxy was the first one that I used. We're too old for Napster, really, I would say. That was the generation immediately after us. That was their thing. So it's we kind of got it after they did. And Napster was already gone by the time I was online, and it was about Audio Galaxy and then very quickly Kazaa and Soulseek.
Yeah, I remember Kazaa going up, and then that getting degraded, and LimeWire was a thing.
LimeWire, yeah.
The main thing I remember is having two parallel systems. So I'd have LimeWire for frontline releases and Soulseek for deep cuts.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. I was also downloading acapellas and instrumentals and shit to make my own bootlegs. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that, how you'd be up all night scraping fucking Soulseek looking for acapellas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was fun.
Let's wrap up Alan McGee, because we're sort of the Nostradamus shit, and now we're gonna do the how wrong can you be shit.
Okay.
So Alan McGee's gonna sitting here in June 1998 saying there's a huge change coming, and no one in the music industry is brave enough to raise it. Like I said, I was not cognizant of that in June 1998 at all. I was very happy with my physical media.
Yes.
So I'm fascinated that Alan McGee's kind of calling this out. However, having identified a potential future, he then somewhat misreads the benefits of that future. Alan thinks it's the best thing to happen for years.
Yeah.
The industry is going to contract and serve the people who love music instead of people who buy music as a fashion accessory.
Okay.
Now, I would argue that did happen.
Yeah. I would argue that's also right.
That's streaming in a nutshell. Where he really veers off course is the second half of his statement. Everything will contract. Advances, budgets, yeah, both true. And it will be healthier because it will be realistic. It's no, it won't be. I'm afraid Alan McGee has fundamentally misread how shareholder capitalism works.
Yeah.
There's a worldwide recession in the music industry, and it's healthy, and it'll survive. We need music, but do we care if we get it from Tower Records or download it online, pay with a credit card? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's the way it's going. And wonderfully, he is both wrong and correct that is the way it's going.
That was the way it went. I mean, you could argue that the budgets are slightly more realistic now. They just had to wade through some pretty tough times to get to where we are now.
There's a quote I didn't put in my notes, which is I think very relevant to some of your early career experience, where he complains about video budgets going like escalating wildly to like the 75 to £100,000 mark, and then compares that to a Jesus and Mary Chain album campaign he's working
Yeah.
on, and how proud he is that they got a video done for the bargain price of £10,000. Like,
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
telling someone their music video budget was a bargain basement £10,000 now, they'd fall off their chair.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. I know a lot of directors that would love £10,000 to make a music video. I know a lot of directors that have been directing for decades and have never had £10,000 to make a music video.
Yeah. Yeah, this feels like a very 1998 problem. But no, it's really interesting. And I think, like I said before, like the context of it being a guy who's had this incredible run of success off the back of Oasis, and in less than 18 months is going to shut at his label and walk away from the whole
Yeah.
thing. I find that fascinating. It's like when you read these quotes in that context, then it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting point of view I'd never heard before from Primal Scream about the end of creation.
Yeah.
So famously, Primal Scream's Exterminator album, which is often held up as their masterpiece, was the last album released on Creation. I think they took 2 singles from that album. The second single was Accelerator, and that is the very last release on Creation Records.
Okay.
And I remember at the time, like the perception of the press was like quite romantic. It was like, yeah, a group which has been so like strongly like affiliated with Alan McGee for so long, being the kind of last release on the label makes total sense. Like, this is a fitting end to Creation Records. And the comments I heard from Primal Scream themselves recently were like, we got completely screwed. Like, we tried to release an album and promote it, and our label just disappeared.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there was no marketing team, there was no promo team, there was barely a distribution team. It's like, yeah, I can see how the reality of that would be very different from the kind of the music
The
press
wistful,
kind of style.
retrospectives. Okay, so that's Alan. Is he done? Or was it? Sorry, it sounds
Yeah.
like...
Yeah, that's quite enough, Alan, for today. So this British Music in Crisis piece is a bit of an epic. There are 2 additional components to it that we're going to cover in much less detail, because one of
Thank the
them
Lord.
has one of them has an interesting point which is stretched very thin, and the other one, the first of those pieces, is an interview with Paul Stark, who is the founder of the long-running US independent label Twin Tone. Twin Tone put out early records by The Replacements, Jayhawks, Soul Asylum, Babes in Toyland, and honorary mention for Husker Du.
Mm-hmm.
His headline is "Record stores are dinosaurs and they are going to die."
Yep, correct.
I mean,
My local HMV I went there today. It wasn't fucking there. Super Drug coming soon. Fucking hell, couldn't believe it. They die, they come back, they die again. It's heartbreaking.
well, I kind of feel like, yes, we lost HMV and our price in the chains, and what we have instead is these kind of artisan non-profit organizations.
They're certainly non-profit.
Yeah.
I certainly, whenever I go to them and spend money, I'm like, why am I spending like £40 over what everything here is worth, just so I can have the experience of having bought it from a shop from someone 20 years younger than me.
I'm at the point now where unless you have something I cannot get literally anywhere else, then the only independent record shops I'm shopping in are ones where I actually know the people who run it. And I'm kind of like, I would like to see your business succeed.
Shout out World of Echo.
World of Echo is fantastic, but I'm trying to avoid going to East London as much as I can.
What's the really good one with the Japanese imports? I always forget the name of this one. They got all the Japanese audiophile LP stuff with the Obi strips. It's fucking awesome. That's really good.
Yeah.
That is a real wallet breaker.
Yeah, I could crank her up. I think I've got an original pressing of the Japanese version of that Harumi Kusono video game soundtrack from there. And yeah, That wounded me.
Do better job with your naming your stores, because neither of us can remember what the shop's called. I always try and find it on Instagram and never find it. So
We would shout you out if you had better branding.
yeah, I would shout out Phonica as well. Still the greatest record store in the world.
Yeah, Phonica's great. My personal greatest record store in the world is Sound Advice in Belfast, which is absolutely incredible. And yeah, is the equal to any record store I've ever been to. Anyway, yeah, so record stores are dinosaurs and they are going to die, says Paul Stark from Twin Tone Records. And he's walking it like he's talking it, because he has made the decision for Twin Tone in 1998 to ditch physical media and move to a direct download system for both albums and individual tracks
Eesh.
from their own website,
Fuck me.
which is crazy. I don't know how that worked out.
Terribly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'm guessing the demand for MP3s of Jayhawk's albums in 1998 was limited.
Historical context. Anyone who sat in any music sales platform startup pitch can recite verbatim is that MP3s did not take off when the stores were siloed. Nobody bought MP3s. It took iTunes bringing everything together for MP3s to take off.
Also, imagine being like Twin Tone's like press officer with the UK press in 1998.
Or being any of their artists.
Anyway, so this is an insanely early adopter move, incredibly ballsy. But there's a quote in here from Paul Stark that is one of those things where it's like, you are way too early, but you are correct on the trajectory things are going at. And the quote is, my view is that in 15 years' time, you will have a central device for music, TV, games, and films, and you'll pay a single bill per month. Like he's basically kind of advocating for like a shift to like subscription services.
Yeah.
For all media. And the idea of having a subscription service for music, TV, games, and films, it's like, yeah, that's just what Apple made.
Yeah. I guess
Like you're just out by a decade.
it would just need to be owned by Universal.
Yeah.
Our time in 1998 draws to a close. Will the music industry survive? Who can possibly say? Join us next week for part 1 of our Christmas double episode special. We are going back a very precise 30 years to Christmas 1995. We'll be counting down both the NME and Melody Maker's top 50 albums of the year, album by album.
In the meantime, you can find us on socials at most of the usual places. You can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all under the Analog Slop name. All one word, spelt ANALOGUESLOP. If you prefer your podcast to involve static pictures, we're also on YouTube. That is youtube.com/@analogslop. That is ANALOGUESLOP. And finally, if you want to send us an email, we're reachable on analogslop@gmail.com.